on. And there's another story on our college about in Mercar and Lugobanda. In Mercar and Lugobanda, there are actually two stories, one after the other, about a war between King in Mercar and the next king after him, Lugobanda. And then Mercar went and fought a long war with Uruk, about 1,000 miles away. And during the course of the war, while they were on their way from Uruk to Arata, wherever Arata was is a mystery, but apparently you had to go over 7 mountain ranges to get to it. I think Arata is Harappa. You get the H silent and change these P's to T's, and you have Harappa. And Harappa was in India, in the Indus Valley. But that's why you had to cross 7 mountain ranges to get from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley. But anyway, Lugobanda took sick. And so they left him behind, put him in a cave to die. But he called on the gods, and about 3 or 4 of the gods came from heaven to visit him, and they restored him to health. In the meantime, he befriended some young bird that flew into his cage, and when the mother went looking for a young bird, the mother was so impressed that Lugobanda would insist that the Anzu bird, gave Lugobanda the gift of super speed, so that Lugobanda could cover the distance between Arata and Uruk in a matter of hours, whereas it would take someone else weeks. Now, I want to remind you, folk, if you think this story is fetched, these people considered this story to be serious history. And, all right, when I took ancient history at UT, our first lesson, the professor emphasized that these people back then had a different mindset than we do. Our mindset, particularly in academia, is that there is no supernatural, there is no God. Everything in the universe has a rational, natural explanation. The ancients had no such starting point in their thinking. Among the ancient peoples, you don't find any atheists. Not until you come to the time of Confucius or the time of Buddha. We don't know if Buddha might have been an atheist, and so might Confucius. But that's about 600, 300 BCE. We don't have any atheists up until that time. These people were extremely religious. Well, I mean, how can you help but be religious? I mean, if the river is God, let's face it, the river exists. If the wind is God, well, the wind exists. The sun does exist. So they were worshiping things that they could see. Also, if you choose to believe that their gods actually dwelt among them and lived in physical presence in a temple, not as in a form of statues, so you can understand why they had no trouble believing that gods existed. All right, sound fetched, sound far out. I meant for it to be. For those of you who missed the first class, maybe you're getting a ride faster than I intended to give one, but I've got to move on. All right. Okay, before I proceed, are there any questions? Can you make sure the answer is not on themselves? All right. Okay, I'll move on. I think I might have mentioned in this class that pyramids are found all over the world, and not just in Egypt. And someone pointed out this morning something I had already heard, that the Great Pyramid of Egypt has 2,300,000 stones if they put it together in 30 years. And they said they put it together in 20, but put it together in 30 years, they would have had to put 5 stones an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. Keep in mind, though, the Great Pyramid is one of 100 pyramids in Egypt alone. What fascination did the ancients have with pyramids? And why? All right. Again, I know that's a super loaded question. Now, your book says, and you've probably been told, that the pyramids were burial places for the kings. I want to throw something at you. Now, I said this to the other class on Monday, and one of the students did some research on it and found out what I'm saying is true. There has never been a body found inside any of the pyramids, with maybe one exception, and that person might have been someone who got lost in one side one and couldn't find his way out. No king's body has ever been found in a pyramid. But where were the king's bodies buried? In the Valley of the Kings, several miles to the west of the Nile River. Now, some of them were buried in such a way that's difficult to find their graves, but they were not buried. As far as we know, no body ever inhabited a pyramid. So why do they call them tombs? Well, they're comparing with maybe with Indian mounds, which were burial places. I do not know. It's just a myth that has been sent down through time. All right, and a myth that will not go away. Okay. Now, I think all of you know this. I want to talk about the Sumerian language. English word, how do you pronounce it? Yeah. Now, a third grader or a second grader might say, that doesn't look like pounds to me. No, because it's borrowed from another language, the Latin word libre, which is a Latin word for pounds. We borrowed that word, and we basically borrowed the abbreviation for it. The entire Sumerian tongue appears to have been written just like this, to where they were using another language. They were using an alphabet from another language, and yet they pronounced it, those words, like we look at this and pronounce it pounds, without even thinking. You get conditioned to it, especially since the last 10 years I was at Lockheed. I worked in calibration, and I had to calibrate scales, and I would write down pound, LBS, 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 all the way up and down, over and over again, and read it, pounds. What is the significance of this? Here's what I think. There's a story that's not just found in the Bible, but it is found in the Bible, that the people were building a tower one day called the Tower of Babel, and one day they woke up and they tried to talk to each other, and none of them could understand each other's language, so they had to give up building. If that story were true, this would be the result. Their inscriptions in writing would remain the same, and maybe they could even read their inscriptions in writing, but each person would pronounce it differently. One person from one family pronounced the words he was reading one way, another one would pronounce another way. They could not understand each other's tongue. The story of the Tower of Babel is also found in the cuneiform writings. Did I mention cuneiform? Cuneiform was the language, the writing that the Sumerians used, and it's basically a wedge-shaped writing. And at first they didn't, but they eventually got to where all the wedges would point either from left to right, or they would point from up to down. This is the cuneiform symbol for God. 3 wedges, 2 of them going to the right and 1 of them going down. Now, the reason for that is they wrote with a stylus. In other words, they wrote on clay tablets, but they stamped the clay. If they stamped it this way, the wedge was going across. If they stamped it this way, the wedge was going. So it's right by going bang, 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 bang. And just simply 2 ways, from left to right or up to down. Now, at first, they would write backwards, but then they decided, oh, that's too hard. So the language did evolve over time, but this was the type of writing that they wrote. And again, there are persons today who can read it. And they actually believe that they could go back, if they could go back in time, they could understand the Sumerians. The Sumerian language was tonal. In other words, if you say something in a low tone, it meant one thing. And if you say it in a higher tone, it meant another. They actually seem to be singing their language to each other. It is a language that is not related to any other language on earth. Now, I've done some research on this, especially since my about third or fourth term graduate paper that was on the Sumerians. There are 100 languages or so that have no known related language, indicating that some languages did not evolve from other languages. They just simply appeared completely formed. By the way, there is no simple language. Every language is complex, and every language has complex verb forms. And even among your supposedly simple people, their language is extremely complex. If there is a simple language, it's English. If you study a foreign language and notice all the verb forms they have. Anyway, some years, about more than 100 years ago, some people got together to try to invent a language that would be spoken by everybody. It's Esperanto, if you've ever heard of Esperanto. But Esperanto never caught on. In Esperanto, every letter had one pronunciation. All the verbs had the same tense. There were no exceptions to any of the grammar rules. All the rules followed the same sequence. Easy language to learn, never caught on. People prefer to speak the language that they learned as a youngster. And by the way, Europeans have a name for people who only speak one language. They call those people Americans. All right. Let's see. Now, oh yeah, Hammurabi's Law Code. Hammurabi's Law Code had some inequality between the classes. In other words, if a man knocked out one man's eye, he was expected to have his eye knocked out. But if a man knocked out his servant's eye, he was simply fined. In other words, the master, if he knocked out his servant's eye, or if the master beat his servant to death, the master was simply fined. He was not himself killed. But it was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life. This was the code of Hammurabi, but it did give some leeway to persons who got involved in altercations between classes. You might think this is unfair. Perhaps it is, but then again, most civilized societies have had some inequality between social classes. It's just the way life usually has been, always has been. All right. Now, oh yes, something else I want to mention, dynasties. These people, when they died, they tried to pass the throne on to their sons. The average dynasty is tended to only last about 3 generations. I might have mentioned that last class. Dynasties have often been short-lived. The father was mighty and strong and built up an empire and turned it over to a son who could not manage it, and the dynasty came to an end. Sometimes the son was able to manage, but oftentimes I think it was the father. The father just got too busy to train the son. And the son then did not have the foggiest idea of what he was doing. All right. With that, I think I will move on from Sumer. Now, I will say this before leaving. I could spend, I believe, the entire semester talking about the Sumerians. But we have to move on. Again, the Sumerians seem to have invented writing, invented a wheel, tamed the cow, the cat, the dog, the camel, learned how to grow wheat, rye, oats, barley. I was reading about them again last night, and I said something about there's a lot of clay there, but it turns out that their soil, such as it was very rich in vitamins and minerals, and it was capable of being farmed, so maybe that was the one good thing they had going for them. Otherwise, they were lacking in a lot of things, and they had to learn how to trade. Some of your Sumerians built up empires, and again, I've mentioned one of them, Sargon.